Okay, I am starting this week's cooking class, our culinary nutrition class. Welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Gabby. I'm a registered dietitian and a culinary nutrition educator, and I am coming to you today from my home to make a couple of soups and stews. So my goal is I just love teaching delicious, affordable, relatively simple and nutritious cooking. And on Sundays, I figure it's a good time to come together. We can get some of our meal prep done and out of the way, or you can watch this video back and cook along with it, or just use it as a demo. So we're making a groundnut stew, which has a West African cuisine origin. Groundnut is another word for peanut. And we're also going to be making a chicken lemon soup, which is inspired by a Greek recipe. So let's get started. And also equally important to me is to keep it real here. So I'll just share with you my kitchen setup, how I prep for any recipe I'm going to make when I'm being organized, which I should be all the time, but you know. And I have my two recipes here in front of me, and I've just scanned the ingredients and I've set out all of my ingredients. So that's all I've done so far. I have one tray for the ingredients for the lemon soup, chicken lemon soup, and I have one tray with my ingredients for the groundnut soup. So I don't want you to think like I've already done all this measuring, I've done all this work before we get here. No, I'm starting with you where you're starting. The only thing I've done is cleaned up my kitchen and gotten out my ingredients. The other thing I have is 3 pots set up over here, one for the rice and then one for each soup. So I think we can still get both of these soups cooked by 11 a.m., which is pretty awesome. So that's the goal. First things first is I am going to start my rice, because we always want to start what takes the longest first. So I'm getting 1/3 of a cup here of brown rice. I'm using brown rice. You can use any kind of rice you'd like, but this is an easy way to get a whole grain in, add that fiber to your diet. So I'm going to rinse my rice. I've got this sieve here. I'm just going to rinse it off. And this rice is going to go into the chicken lemon soup. So I'm cooking it separately, and then it's going to be part of that soup. So add it to my pot. And for cooking brown rice, it's 1 part rice to 2 parts water. So since it's 1/3 a cup of rice, I'm going to fill the same measuring cup twice with water. Put a pinch of salt into there, and then turn my stove on. So I'm going to let it come to a boil, and then I'll cover that pot and turn it down to a simmer. But for now, my rice is set. I'm going to start working on my vegetables. So here I've got a colander of vegetables for both of the soups that I'm making today. I'm just going to give them all a rinse. So I have 4 carrots, 1 sweet potato, and 1 onion. For the sweet potato, I like to always keep the skin on. For that, again, a lot of nutrients, phytonutrients, which are just compounds found in plants, are in the skin of our vegetables. And so when I don't have to peel something, I don't. So I just make sure to wash it real well. Same with the carrots. You can wash them real well and not peel them, or you can peel them, whatever you feel comfortable with. But especially for potatoes, I do recommend keeping the skin on because there's a lot of nice fiber and other nutrients in that skin. So, which soup shall we start with? I am going to start with the vegetarian peanut or ground nut stew. Now, I have never personally been to the countries where this stew is from, so I am so appreciative of the cuisines of West Africa that brought this recipe to us because it is creamy, it is filling, and it's super simple to make. So looking at the recipe, I'm going to start with our sweet potato here. And whenever cutting anything round and rolly, I like to make a flat surface for much safer cutting. Now, just to show you how I hold my chef's knife, you want to take your thumb and your index finger to pinch the blade and then wrap your hand around it. A chef's knife is just a knife that's 6 to 8 inches long, and it's great for cutting vegetables, especially larger vegetables. But this is pretty much the knife that I use all the time. Now I'm going to cut the potato into strips. And then I'll dice it. Turn it sideways and cut it into little chunks. So whichever hand is not your cutting hand, you want to kind of use that as your measuring stick or your ruler. And what I mean by that is as I cut, then I move my hand back just the right amount to make the size that I'm looking for. And my knife brushes right against my knuckles like that, but my fingers are tucked so I don't have to worry about cutting myself. That's how you can make a dice that's, you can control the size of your cutting and your dicing. All right. And so the size is really up to you. And I always like to imagine I'm eating this dish, and when I'm taking a bite, how big of a piece of vegetable do I want to get? And so kind of refining this a little here. Some of these are a little longer than others. There we go. Now I'm going to go for my carrots. Just cut that top piece off. So one of the things that I find so important and kind of not talked about enough in nutrition is the importance of incorporating your own preferences, whether those be cultural preferences, foods you just grew up with, your favorite foods. And the truth is, not everybody grew up eating, kale salads and grilled chicken breast, which often is sort of what is promoted as, health foods. But there's ways to really include all of your favorite dishes in a healthy eating pattern. And so if that's, something you're interested in doing, then working with a dietitian can really help you to look at your overall eating pattern and figure out how you can still get your favorite foods in there. Because if you're told to eat foods, or you think you should eat foods that you at the end of the day don't really like, you're less likely to be satisfied by them. So now for my onion. So I love how this recipe already has, we're working with, we've got 3 vegetables here, that those orange vegetables with the vitamin A in there. Now we're working with the onion, and this is also going to have some kale in it. So 4 different vegetables along with some spices gives us a nutritious mix. Okay, so dicing my onion, I've cut my onion in half through the root, okay? And I keep the root intact. And then I slice my onion horizontally. Then I turn it and I make slices the other way, not all the way back to the root, just about 2/3 of the way, so that the whole onion is still intact. And now, when I cut it again, it comes out as this nice dice. And so that's my favorite way of dicing an onion. Towards the root side, I kind of got to move it around and do whatever works. I think I see my rice boiling. So I'm going to turn the heat down to a simmer and cover that pot. That'll finish cooking just as the rest of our recipes are done. Brown rice takes a bit longer, so probably 35, 40 minutes. You could also use leftover rice in this recipe, or leftover pasta, or really any grain that you have in your fridge can go into your soup. I guess we're getting just to the end of soup season, really, here in Boston, thankfully, as it warms up. So I've got all my vegetables cut right here for the ground nut stew. I'm going to turn on my stove with this large pot here to heat up a couple tablespoons of oil. When I cook at a medium heat, my favorite oil to use is extra virgin olive oil because of its antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties, healthy fats. If I'm cooking at a higher temperature and I'm trying to get a sear on my vegetables or on a piece of meat or protein, then I will use an avocado or a canola oil. So again, extra virgin olive oil, it's not for high heat cooking, it's for, gentle sauteing or putting on, in a salad dressing. Shouldn't get heated above 350 degrees. Above 350, if you're trying to brown something or you've got your oven really hot to roast some vegetables, I recommend a higher heat oil like a avocado oil is my favorite, or canola, light olive oil, sesame oil. There's a variety of other oils that have what we call a higher smoke point. So I'm gonna let this heat up a little. Here. And then I'm gonna put my veggies in to the pot. All right. I like to season as I go. What I mean by that is every step of the cooking process, I like to add a little bit of salt so that it's well seasoned by the time it's finished. Now, we know that, eating lots of salt or sodium is associated with higher blood pressure, and some people who have hypertension or high blood pressure are extra cautious about the amount of salt that they consume. So I have a trick that I recommend. You can, if you use regular table salt, 1 teaspoon of table salt is the recommended amount of sodium for an entire day. So I would recommend, assuming that some of your food is cooked at home and some of your food may be eaten out of the house or might be semi-processed food, you can take half a teaspoon of salt and put it into a little jar for your cooking. And that is the amount of salt that you would add to your food in one day, no more than that. Of course, it's a little more detailed than that because if we're using other ingredients in our recipes that already have salt in them, we want to be aware of that as well. So the other neat thing is that kosher salt has larger granules than table salt or iodized salt. And so you can use, it's 2 whole teaspoons of kosher salt that has the recommended amount of sodium or the maximum upper limit of sodium for the day. So I always cook with kosher salt. I keep it in a little dish like this so that I can easily take a pinch and season my vegetables. So I'm going to take a couple pinches here. And we're going to let these cook for a few minutes. And let's see what's up next. While the vegetables for the groundnut stew are cooking, I'm going to start to prepare my vegetables for the chicken lemon soup. And so that is really just 2 carrots chopped. So let's go again with the carrots. Make some flat surfaces here to cut them more safely. And for this soup, I kind of want the vegetables to be really little. It's a more delicate soup rather than a stew. So I'm thinking I want small pieces. And also, the faster you want something to cook, like a hard vegetable like a carrot, the smaller you should cut it. And I'm still using that method where one of my hands is in this claw shape and the knife is just brushing right against my knuckles. It's a safe way to cut. All right. So this Greek chicken lemon soup is so simple, which is one of the reasons why I love it. What we have to do is start by cooking or bringing our broth, and well, really bringing our broth up to a boil. And so today I am using better than bouillon as my broth. So this is a really cost-effective way to get broth. You can buy liquid broth in, one of those cardboard containers, but you get so many servings of broth out of this paste, and the whole jar costs $4.50, I think. And it has 38. This makes 38 cups of broth. So how I do this is I'm going to pour 6 cups of water into my pot here. And for each cup of water, it's 1 teaspoon of broth. So one of the reasons I like this better than bouillon brand is because it has very few ingredients in it. Roasted chicken, salt, a little sugar. It's got some turmeric in it, which is why it's this yellow color. And importantly, per teaspoon, which makes 1 cup of broth, we have 500 milligrams of sodium. And so if you're having 1 cup of broth, which will probably make 1.5 cups of soup just because of all the other stuff in there, it's 500 milligrams of salt. So that is absolutely fine for 1 meal. The recommendation for sodium for a day is not to exceed 2,300 milligrams. So you really have about 750 milligrams of sodium per meal, but you might have some snacks in there as well. I'll be honest, I personally am not someone who really counts all my sodium. Some people need to watch this more than others. And again, working personally with a dietitian can really help you do this and figure out how to make your food actually tasty as well. Because let's face it, salt is what brings out the flavor in food. So we don't want to skip it altogether, nor do we have to. So for 6 cups, I need 6 teaspoons, which is actually the same thing as 2 tablespoons. So I'm gonna add that. My broth here. Maybe one time I will do a class on making our own homemade chicken stock or chicken broth and how we can easily throw that in the freezer. But if you buy a whole chicken and roast a whole chicken, you can use those bones to make a delicious stock. And then you've got your own homemade stock, which is the gold standard, the best. But keeping this in the fridge for some quicker cooking is just also, it's another tool we can keep in our toolkit. So I'm gonna bring my camera over to my stove now so you can see what's going on. That's where the action is right now. So over here, we've got our carrots and onions. This is gonna be the ground nut stew, and this is going to be the chicken lemon. So switching back over to my ground nut stew, I'm gonna add the spices. So today we're using some curry powder. A teaspoon. Curry powder has turmeric amongst other spices. And spices also have a lot of these health or disease preventive compounds in them called phytonutrients. Phyto just means plant, so these are nutrients found in plants. So turmeric, you may have heard, has anti-inflammatory compounds. This also has coriander, fenugreek, cumin, bay leaf, cloves, ginger. So all of these spices have their own set of cancer preventive, health enhancing phytonutrients. So I did 1 teaspoon of that curry powder. And we're also going to do, if you like things a little bit spicy, a pinch of red pepper flakes or more. That's totally up to you. I have this amazing Aleppo pepper that I am using. It's a little different than red pepper flakes, but it's got a little less heat and some different flavors in there. So I'm going to use that today. I'm going to use about a half a teaspoon of that. And what we're doing here is we're blooming the spices. That just means heating up our spices in the oil allows that aroma and flavor to come out. So we'll let that go real briefly in there. And then we've got to add our broth. So for this, we are using 3 cups of broth here. And so I'm going to similarly add 3 cups of water and 3 teaspoons of that bouillon, better than bouillon paste. So 3 cups of water right in there, you can see. Maybe I'll switch places since there's more going on with this right now. And you can see that beautiful color. And let's add our broth. Three teaspoons is the same as 1 tablespoon. Of course, you can use vegetable broth here instead of chicken broth so that this groundnut stew is completely vegetarian. And we are now going to add our tomato paste, which is really just slow cooked tomato puree to evaporate a lot of the water and intensify the flavor. Tomato paste has kind of an umami, rich, savory flavor. And so it is a nice addition to this stew. Sometimes if a recipe calls for tomato paste and I don't have it, I will substitute with about half as much ketchup because that is also a very reduced or intense tomato flavor with, of course, other ingredients added like sugar and vinegar. So in a pinch, I'll use ketchup. Tomato paste often comes in a can like this, and a recipe will only call for a tablespoon or 2. So use what you have to, and you can freeze the rest or keep the rest in your fridge for a couple of weeks. It should be totally fine. And I need just a little more tomato paste here. I like to rinse off the top of any can before I open it, because cans have been sitting on store shelves and moved around and, you know, can be covered in dust. So I'm opening a new can of tomato paste here. Again, tomato paste, tomato sauce, these are products that can also have a lot of salt hiding in them. This one, not bad at all. We don't even really need to count it. It's just 20 milligrams for 2 tablespoons. All right, add that in. And lastly, for the groundnut stew, we're gonna add in our peanut butter. And we're gonna use half a cup of peanut butter. Any brand you want is fine. I recommend looking for a peanut butter brand that has peanuts as the only ingredient, rather than peanuts, oil, and sugar. Oil and sugar are often the other ingredients that get added to peanut butter. But we really don't need those because peanuts have a lot of their own oil in them, and nuts have great healthful fats. So I'm using half a cup of peanut butter and going to pour that right into this groundnut stew. The peanut butter is what gives the groundnut stew its name. Groundnut is another way of saying peanut. And if anybody has personal experience growing up with this recipe, I'd love to hear about or see your version of the recipe, where you learned the recipe, all that good stuff. And now all we have to do is let this cook until the sweet potatoes are fork tender or soft enough to be pierced with a fork. And then I'll do my final touches for this delicious stew. So let's take that off center stage. Move back over to our chicken lemon soup. All I have here is broth right now. So I'm gonna add our carrots to it. Start cooking these carrots in there. If you want to add other vegetables to this soup, like bell pepper, I don't know, some of your other favorite vegetables, maybe some peas could go nicely in here, go right ahead. There's a lot of room for flexibility in this soup. And I'm gonna also add my chicken. So here is where you have a choice. This particular recipe calls for canned chicken. Great time saver, super cost effective. You still get your protein. This is gonna add some salt as well to your meal. So you probably don't need to flavor this or season this soup with additional salt if you're using canned chicken and prepared broth. Between the two of those, we're getting a good amount of that sodium. However, if canned chicken isn't your thing, go ahead and dice up some chicken breast, chicken thigh, whatever is your favorite, and put it in the soup right now, let it cook in that broth. So I'm gonna show you the canned chicken version today. I bet you my cats are gonna come running over because whenever I open a can, they think that it's for them. So I'm gonna just strain out this liquid here. You could put the liquid in, but that's where a lot of the salt lives, in that liquid, and so I took it out and I'm just adding the chicken. So this is called lemon chicken soup. We haven't done anything yet with our lemon, and there's another important ingredient we haven't yet dealt with for this soup. In order to make this broth a little bit richer and creamy and really special, we're gonna add some egg yolk to it. And so I need to separate my whites from my yolks here. How are we doing on time? Good, it's 10:45. We still have 15 minutes to complete the hour. So to separate the whites from the yolks, I'm gonna split this shell and then just pass the yolk back from one shell to the other. And here's my white and here's my yolk. So I'm gonna crack it, split the shell in half, and pass that yolk from one shell to the other so that the egg white drips down into one bowl, and I plop that yolk into another bowl. If you get a little bit of white into the egg yolk bowl, it's no big deal. There we go. Rinse off my hands. You can save those egg whites in your refrigerator for an egg white scramble. You don't need to throw that out. Now, here comes the important part and the sort of the only technical part in this whole cooking process, which is this thing we're gonna do called tempering the egg yolks. Now, if egg yolks or eggs in general get hot really quickly, the protein denatures and we get scrambled eggs. That's what cooking an egg is. It's denaturing the protein and it changes the shape of the protein in the egg. We don't want to scramble this egg. We want this to become part of a nice creamy broth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pour some broth into the egg to slowly bring it up to a hotter temperature. That's all. Just taking a couple ladles of broth. I'm going to mix it with the egg yolk to make these yolks warmer without sort of shocking them into scrambling. So We're bringing up the temperature slowly on the egg yolks by doing this. All right, and now I'm ready to add this into the pot of soup, the chicken lemon soup, and mix it around. And you can see the color of that broth changed. It got a little more opaque, and it just adds this creamy richness to the soup. So I highly recommend using the egg yolks in this recipe. So all that we're really waiting to do here for the chicken lemon soup, especially if you're using canned chicken that's already cooked, is for these carrots to soften a little bit. So the last two ingredients for this soup are, of course, the lemons and then the greens that we're gonna add. So I've got some lemons. I'm actually gonna zest these real quick because I need the zest for another recipe that I'm making a little later. Lemon zest is delicious to add to lots of foods like rice, potatoes, mashed potatoes, salad dressings. Okay, so again, this zest, you don't have to zest your lemons. I'm saving this zest for something that I am doing later. So I'm gonna just cut these lemons in half and squeeze them right into my soup here. Making sure I squeeze them over a cupped hand so that I catch the seeds. And this recipe calls for 1/4 cup of lemon juice, which probably is one big juicy lemon, maybe 1.5. But we can use our taste buds to determine that if we have enough lemon juice, or you can measure it. Okay, so I have both these stews here, and they're both in their final cooking stages. So what I want to do is taste the both of them. That's delicious. And that is so bright and lemony. It's just really flavorful broth. Now, I love to add some lemon to this groundnut stew as well, because citrus brightens up a whole dish. Sort of how salt brings out the flavors, citrus like lemon juice or acid like a little bit of vinegar can do that as well. So if you feel like something you've made is a little bland or a little dull, try adding some lemon juice to it, especially if you don't want to add lots of extra salt. And so lastly, we've got to stir our greens into both of these dishes. So soups are a fantastic way to use up some greens that have maybe been sitting in your fridge and are starting to not look so great, like these ones here. So I've just got to wash this off. Let me give it a chop those roots off. And how I like to wash a head of greens like this is I fill a bowl with water, a big bowl with water, or you can fill your sink with water. Add the greens and slosh it around in here, and that way any sand or dirt that's in there just falls to the bottom of that big bowl of water. This is a much more effective way of cleaning greens or herbs than just rinsing them in a colander. Because here, you're submerging them in the water, you're shaking them around, and any of that dirt or sand will fall to the bottom. All right, and then I take them out of the water, they're in my colander. I'm gonna add these greens to my chicken lemon soup, or at least some of them. Just add them right in there. You can use spinach here, you can use frozen spinach, fresh spinach. This happens to be endive. We have this at home, so I'm using this. And I'm just gonna let that wilt in there. That's it. For this soup here, this groundnut soup, you can use kale, you can use spinach. I'm gonna use the rest of these greens. I also happen to have some kale that's in this bag here. This is already washed. Add some of that. And we're just letting it wilt. That's it. So we're letting that kale wilt in there. So you add the greens right at the end. You can add it after you turn off the heat. And then, perfect, our brown rice is done as well. So I'm gonna put that right into the grease soup. And both of these are done. I'm gonna plate them up to show you kind of what they look like when you serve them. Thank you so much for being here today. I have recorded this. I'm gonna put it on YouTube for the replay for anyone who wants to watch it. So feel free to share this video with others. Let me plate up these soups for you. Two bowls here. Let's get my ladle. This beautiful chicken lemon soup. It's got our whole grain, it's got our vegetables and our protein. And then we'll plate up our groundnut stew. The color of this one is so vibrant. These are just beautiful, very, very different stews, but these will store well in your fridge. And if you want to give a little garnish, if you're someone who, like me, likes a combination of textures and some crunchy toppings on your soup, pepitas or pumpkin seeds would go beautifully on top of this groundnut soup, or you could certainly do some chopped peanuts. So that is our cooking class for today. And I hope you enjoyed. My name is Gabby, and I also take personal clients for nutrition counseling. So if you want to work more personally on your diet, please reach out to me. You can find me on Gabby's Cooking Club on Facebook and Instagram. And I hope to see you next time. I will be back most likely next Sunday, but definitely the Sunday after that. So take good care and enjoy. Happy cooking.